Adolf Hitler suffered, it seems, from a genetic disorder that stunts normal puberty. Researchers have extracted his DNA from a swatch of fabric with Hitler's blood from the sofa on which he...
There's been historical documentation that Hitler had right-sided cryptorchidism, so this is an undescended testicle.
A fragment of blood-stained cloth has unlocked a chilling secret that rewrites what we know about one of history's most infamous figures. For the first time, scientists have sequenced Adolf Hitler's DNA, revealing startling truths about his biology that go beyond the myths and speculation. What if a rare genetic disorder shaped not only his body, but also the man behind the dictator? Could his physical makeup offer clues to the obsessions and behaviors that terrorized the 20th century? This is an investigation into the hidden genetic blueprint of power, obsession, and myth. The discovery and DNA sequencing. It began with a small, blood-stained piece of cloth, an unassuming fragment tied to one of history's darkest chapters. Preserved for decades as an artifact of a moment frozen in time, this cloth has now opened a groundbreaking scientific gateway. For the first time, scientists have managed to extract and sequence Adolf Hitler's DNA, shedding light on the biological makeup of a man whose actions shaped the 20th century in shocking ways. This scientific achievement is nothing short of extraordinary. Extracting viable DNA from aged, contaminated material presents immense challenges, and succeeding in reconstructing a genetic blueprint from such a source marks a milestone in forensic and historical genetics. It required cutting-edge technology, meticulous care, and international collaboration to piece together what little biological evidence remained. The analysis was conducted by experts who specialize in genomic science related to human history and disease. Their goal was not just to identify the genetic code, but to uncover truths behind long-standing questions about Hitler's health, ancestry, and possible hidden conditions. This approach combines modern science with history, bridging the gap between cold genetic data and the fervent mysteries surrounding the dictator. What emerged from the sequencing was far more than a simple list of genes.
Die Bewegung geht zu Ende. Was für Millionen Deutsche.
It promised to rewrite some assumptions and challenge rumors that have persisted for decades. This genetic key offered a fresh perspective into the man behind the myth, opening a door few had imagined could be unlocked so many years after his death. Yet, despite the anticipation, the DNA results arrived with caution. Scientists knew that interpretation wasn't straightforward. Genetics alone could not fully explain the complexities of a person's life, personality, or the evil they inflicted. Still, the biological evidence added a new layer to the puzzle, one steeped in scientific rigor rather than speculation. With the DNA in hand, researchers focused on specific markers, searching for genetic anomalies or clues that explained both Hitler's physical traits and perhaps his psychological tendencies. This was not merely about confirming identity, but about understanding the man from a genetic standpoint. What remarkable or disturbing secrets could his genome reveal? At first, the revelation was subtle, small genetic variations that by themselves might seem unremarkable in other contexts. But when linked to historical records and medical descriptions, these findings formed a pattern that suggested the presence of a rare genetic disorder, something affecting crucial aspects of physical development. This step, the connection between DNA and history, set the stage for questions deeper than biology. Could a genetic condition influence not just appearance, but behavior? Could it explain rumors long whispered, yet never proven? The answers lay ahead, waiting in the genetic code, ready to be unveiled. Before uncovering those profound revelations, it is important to understand the nature of the genetic disorder found and why it matters so much in the story of this infamous figure. Evidence of a rare genetic disorder. Among the many genes scanned in the analysis, a particular mutation stood out, a rare anomaly within the PROK2 gene. strongly associated with a condition called Kallmann syndrome. This disorder disrupts normal development and puberty, often leading to underdeveloped or absent organs. It was a discovery that some historians had hinted at, but never confirmed. Kallmann syndrome is characterized by congenital hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, a complicated term describing the failure to produce the hormones needed for reproductive maturity. The genetic mutation found in Hitler's DNA fits this profile, explaining known clinical signs from his life. One well-documented example is his right-sided cryptorchidism, or the presence of an undescended testicle, a condition that had long been speculated and stigmatized. This disorder could help decode the origins of numerous rumors surrounding Hitler's physicality. Whether whispered among soldiers in World War I or mocked in private conversations, stories about his physique and sexual attributes were persistent throughout his lifetime. The DNA evidence now confirms that these rumors were rooted in biological reality. However, the importance of this mutation is not limited to changing the physical aspects. Emotional health, social behavior, and psychological resilience heavily rely on sexual development and hormone balance. Researchers think that such a condition may have hindered the formation of close relationships, and thus the person may have become very isolated or even obsessed in other areas of life. The medical practitioners who conducted the study opined that Kallmann syndrome frequently resulted in the lack of or late arrival of puberty, which could result in emotional and psychological effects as well. These possible effects, in Hitler's case, might have included the feeling of being unworthy or being quite a social alien, things that probably intertwine with his extreme views and hunger for power. The mutation also clarifies the report about his physical tenderness around him. Hitler, who was strict in many ways, including his health, had many illnesses, but the PROK2 gene defect,
Das große persönliche und geistige Treffen der alten Streiter und Kampfgenossen,
gives an explanation of his underlying weakness. And this weakness is not only due to his health, but also because it is part of his very nature. It ties up the man's outside weakness to an inside genetic script. Besides, the discovery calls into question the usual images of Hitler as a strong and virile man. Rather, it portrays a person whose body showed weaknesses that influenced his life, and maybe even his character in ways that historians have not recognized before. It makes us think again about how much and in what ways biology might have been involved in the psychological weaving of his life story. In the end, this genetic thing provides evidence that the long-held whispers were true, giving a scientific explanation for what had been only speculation. It helps us to see Hitler more clearly and with more sophistication as a historical figure who was not only molded by his DNA, but also as a human being who was partly influenced by his genetic makeup. As the physical dimension takes shape through these findings, it is important to explore how public perception and rumors about Hitler's body influenced his image and legacy, impact on physicality, and public perception. Throughout his life, Adolf Hitler was the subject of numerous rumors about his physical anatomy, particularly regarding his genitalia. These stories ranged from claims of small or underdeveloped organs to suggestions that he was mocked by fellow soldiers during World War I for such traits. The DNA findings now provide credible backing to these accounts. One of the main medical observations about Hitler was his right-sided cryptorchidism, an undescended testicle that contributes to impaired development. This physical anomaly was rarely discussed openly, but contributed significantly to the whispered rumors. Soldiers' taunts about him during the war, possibly targeting his masculinity, gained new weight in light of genetic proof.
Ich habe mir ein Ziel gesteckt, nämlich die 30 Parteien aus Deutschland hinauszufegen.
These persistent tales shaped public perception in subtle but serious ways. For a man obsessed with power, dominance, and image, such vulnerabilities could have provoked deep insecurities. The ancient interplay between physicality and authority was likely at work, perhaps fueling his relentless need for control in political arenas. Historians have speculated that these physical insecurities played a role in Hitler's personality and leadership style. The humiliation or self-consciousness arising from these physical challenges might have fostered an aggressive, even obsessive response. His fixation on purity, strength, and dominance might reflect an attempt to compensate. Interestingly, Hitler worked to reinforce a certain image of masculinity and vitality despite these underlying issues. Propaganda and public appearances emphasized strength, stamina, and charisma. But behind the scenes, his health and physicality told a different story, one rooted in fragility confirmed by this new genetic evidence. The revelation also adds complexity to understanding how the dictator projected himself versus how he was perceived by others. The mismatch between the myth of an unassailable Führer and the reality of his physical limitations deepens the psychological profile of this historic figure. Moreover, these findings challenge some cultural stigmas around masculinity, showing that even men in positions of immense power can harbor vulnerabilities. It humanizes a figure often depicted as monstrous in all respects, reminding us that biology does not dictate morality, but can influence character. The newfound genetic insight also brings to mind the damaging effects of ridicule and stigma. For Hitler, societal mockery over intimate aspects of his body may have deepened psychological wounds, influencing not just his personal life, but potentially his political path. It is a stark reminder of how biology and society collide to shape individual destinies. Unveiling the truth behind these physical rumors sets the stage for examining the potential psychological and behavioral ramifications tied to Hitler's genetic disorder. Insights that probe even deeper into what made this man who he was. Psychological and behavioral implications. The discovery of Adolf Hitler's rare genetic disorder opens a window into understanding not just his physical traits, but also possible influences on his psychological makeup. Kallmann syndrome, by impairing development and delaying hormonal maturity, can have profound effects on emotional and social behavior. Experts speculate that such a condition may partly explain Hitler's difficulty forming intimate relationships and deep-seated emotional struggles. Historians have long noted his obsessive devotion to politics and power, possibly fueled by personal insecurities and a profound sense of isolation. A condition affecting hormone levels can influence mood regulation and social bonding, which might have contributed to his rigid focus and single-minded pursuit of control. This genetic insight adds a biological dimension to interpretations of his relentless ambition and detachment from personal connections. Beyond the biological factors, Kallmann syndrome frequently manifests with anosmia, the loss or severe reduction of the sense of smell, also linked to social and psychological consequences. This sensory loss could have further isolated Hitler, reducing his ability to connect with others on a subtle emotional level. Social isolation often intensifies feelings of alienation, potentially deepening the desire for dominance as a compensatory mechanism. Medical literature notes that individuals with this syndrome sometimes experience low self-esteem, anxiety, and depression, emotions that may have shaped Hitler's outlook and interpersonal style.
Erst einmal in der Geschichte unseres Volkes wird ein Reich.
While psychology is complex and multi-layered, the genetic condition provides a tangible element in a larger matrix of influences driving his behavior. It frames part of the puzzle that humanizes the otherwise enigmatic figure. Grasping the syndrome further clarifies his oftentimes strange habits in the domains of personal and especially love relationships. The fact that he couldn't establish and keep healthy, long-lasting emotional attachments is consistent with the difficulties that people suffering from hormonal and developmental disorders often face. It rather helps to explain his emotional detachment and perhaps compensatory lifestyle that revolves around ideology and control. That biological factor would have probably been a driving force, together with the external pressures and experiences that determined his rise. Bad self-image, heightened insecurities, and discriminatory social experiences could have given rise to a vicious cycle of fixation and extreme behavior. Genetics and environment were the two elements intertwined into one that eventually revealed his personality and actions. To say that genetics do not decide man's fate is true, but at the same time, they influence one's tendencies and weaknesses. The respective study yields a deeper comprehension of the forces influencing Hitler's intricate character, the intersection of biology with the historical and social factors that formed the man. It is a reminder that the understanding of evil is a long and difficult journey, requiring a delicate approach that takes nature and nurture into account.
Müsst euch schon in jüngsten Jahren zu diesem Begriff der Ehre bekennen.
Moreover, this discovery has brought up the matter of the limitations of scientific investigation and historical interpretation in light of the same. To what extent can genetic information explain in-depth human characteristics such as ideology, etc., even cruelty and ambition? It helps us to do a thorough reflection on the matter of the interplay between biology and moral responsibility without justifying or downplaying the consequences. The interplay between genetic disorder and psychological development brings us naturally to reconsider rumors about Hitler's origins and ancestry, another aspect clarified by recent genetic findings. Genetic ancestry, confirmation. Among the many persistent rumors surrounding Adolf Hitler was one that questioned his ethnic origins, a claim that he might have had Jewish ancestry despite his virulent anti-Semitism. This allegation fueled decades of speculation and conspiracy, sometimes used for political or ideological aims. Genetic sequencing provides a definitive answer, helping to put those rumors to rest. The comprehensive analysis of Hitler's genome confirms his ancestry as firmly Austrian-German, aligning precisely with his own insistence during his lifetime. Historical records show he encouraged medical experts to verify his lineage, reflecting both pride and paranoia about his ethnic background. The genetic data affirms these claims, dismantling the myth of hidden Jewish heritage. This confirmation has significant implications. It not only settles a controversial topic, but also challenges narratives built on conjecture. The idea that Hitler's hatred might stem from internalized conflict about his origins loses ground in light of solid genetic evidence. Instead, motivations for his ideology must be found elsewhere, in beliefs, environment, and personal psychology. The genetic results underscore the importance of careful, evidence-based history. Our understanding of sensitive topics like ancestry benefits when science clarifies doubts that once festered in rumor and prejudice. This case illustrates how genetics can cut through misinformation and enrich historical accuracy. Hitler's rejection of any suggestion of mixed heritage was well documented, and the DNA findings now retrospectively validate his claims.
Adolf Hitler's DNA, unlocking a whole new chapter in our understanding of the dictator.
Attempts to rewrite his genealogy appear rooted in political motives rather than factual bases. Knowing his authentic genetic background allows historians to focus on more relevant aspects of his character and policies. Moreover, this clarity sheds light on how the man himself viewed identity and purity, key themes in his ideology and propaganda. The obsession with racial purity and ethnic superiority cannot be traced to concealed ancestry, but stems from ideological convictions shaped by historical and cultural contexts. The confirmation of European heritage also reaffirms the dangers of ethnic scapegoating, showing how falsehoods about identity can fuel hatred and violence. It serves as a reminder that unraveling truth is essential in combating prejudice and rewriting history honestly. In considering Hitler's genetic profile alongside these findings, a complex figure is revealed, someone shaped by biology and environment, but not defined by genetic myth. This balanced perspective helps prevent oversimplification of historical villains. At the same time, contemporary historians urge restraint in treating such conclusions as final or incontrovertible. Claims of definitive genetic confirmation must be weighed against the fragmentary nature of surviving biological material and the methodological limits inherent in historical DNA research. Unlike modern forensic cases, figures from the early 20th century rarely leave behind uncontested samples, making absolute certainty difficult. As a result, many scholars frame these findings as strongly suggestive rather than conclusively determinative. This caution does not weaken the broader historical argument, but strengthens it. By acknowledging uncertainty, researchers preserve the integrity of both science and history, resisting the temptation to replace rumor with overconfidence. The collapse of conspiracy narratives, then, rests not on dramatic proof alone, but on the cumulative alignment of archival records, demographic patterns, and genetic plausibility. Importantly, the fading of ancestry myths redirects attention to the real engines of hatred, ideology, power, and choice. Obsessive focus on bloodlines risks mirroring the very thinking that underpinned Nazi racial doctrine. Historians, therefore, emphasize that dismantling false claims should never reinforce the centrality of race itself. In this light, genetic discussion becomes a corrective rather than a centerpiece. It clears away distraction, allowing scholarship to return to questions of responsibility, belief, and consequence. The value lies not in redefining identity through DNA, but in reaffirming that history is driven by human decisions made within specific social and political worlds. With ancestry verified and physical and psychological traits better understood, the next steps lie in examining related medical records and personal histories that connect genetics with lived experience. The role of medical records and historical testimonies. While the DNA analysis provides groundbreaking insights, it gains greater depth when connected with the extensive medical records and eyewitness accounts from Adolf Hitler's life. Throughout his years, numerous doctors and nurses documented his health issues, some noting signs consistent with the genetic disorder now identified. These historical documents lend credibility to the genetic findings, weaving science with lived experience. One well-known medical observation is Hitler's right-sided cryptorchidism, an undescended testicle, a condition verified by doctors and discussed within military and political circles. Such documentation supports the genetic link to Kallmann syndrome.
Should Hitler be exempt from that? He's, we can't put him on some sort of pedestal as some sort of mystical person that we can't.
Confirming that this physical anomaly was a genuine medical issue rather than mere rumor or propaganda. The consistency between genetic data and medical testimony strengthens the case for understanding Hitler's physical development through this lens. Personal accounts from those close to Hitler also reveal his peculiar health habits and vulnerabilities. He was known for his strict routines, dietary restrictions, and attention to ailments that others might have overlooked. Some described his physical frailty and secretiveness about his health, which aligns with a man coping with congenital difficulties that went beyond visible symptoms. Historical testimonies also highlight Hitler's emotional and social detachment, frequently noted by his contemporaries as unusual or extreme. While psychological reasons for this behavior have long been debated, these descriptions acquire a new perspective when paired with his likely hormonal imbalances and genetic predispositions. The merger of medical and anecdotal evidence paints a nuanced picture of a man grappling with complex biological and emotional realities. Besides, the records show that Hitler was a patient who made use of different medical treatments, such as stimulants and substances, which were perhaps meant to counter the effects of his disorder. Such modalities signify the effort to control the symptoms that actually came from the conditions that are now genetically linked. This doctor's doses present the struggle of the body underneath the heroic facade of the public. The union of a personal story with medical history also penetrates into the matter of health influencing decisions during the most critical points. For instance, it is a matter of some historians that physical frailty or sickness was on the side of Hitler, and thus affected his mood, patience, or even decision-making, which is the case of biology being into the events that changed the world. These links remind us that historical characters are not only influenced by ideology, but also by their physical limitations. The genetic evidence and the health documentation over the years, quite the opposite, made reassessment of prior beliefs easier. It goes ahead and presents the caricature of Hitler as a mere willpower figure, as a thing of the past, and proposes a man whose identity is profoundly entangled with that of his biology. Nevertheless, such a reconsideration leads to a more nuanced and, therefore, historical understanding that does not excuse the wrongdoings. At the same time, the existing medical records, though useful, are not exhaustive and also comprise inconsistencies, which bring to our attention the difficulties involved in reconstructing a complete medical profile. Hence, one should be very careful in making the interpretations, for on the one hand, he should not go to extremes, and on the other hand, he should be aware of the very interesting clues. The genetic discoveries underscore this meticulous dialogue between evidence and interpretation. Together, these medical and eyewitness sources enrich the scientific narrative, supporting a more complete view of Hitler's life. Their combined power guides us toward greater insight, but also sets the stage for how experts and historians have reacted to this new genetic chapter. Scientific and historical reactions. The revelation of Adolf Hitler's genetic disorder has sparked a range of responses from historians, scientists, and ethicists, underscoring the complexity of interpreting such findings. Many experts welcome the pioneering use of DNA to clarify facts about a notorious figure, while cautioning against simplistic conclusions based solely on genetics. It is seen as a valuable but partial piece of a multifaceted puzzle. Historical scholars appreciate how genetics can confirm or refute long-standing theories, such as rumors about Hitler's health and ancestry. Yet, they emphasize that genetic predisposition cannot fully explain the ideological extremism or moral depravity he exhibited. The disorder may help understand parts of his personality or behavior, but it cannot account for the conscious choices he made. Medical scientists also view the findings as a breakthrough in forensic analysis and historical biology. The successful sequencing from a fragment of blood demonstrates remarkable advances in technology and expands possibilities for examining other historical figures. However, they stress the importance of correlating genetic data with clinical and historical information to avoid misinterpretation. Ethicists highlight the delicate balance in communicating such discoveries. There is concern that presenting genetic factors might inadvertently invite deterministic thinking or suggest biological excuses for heinous acts. They argue for careful framing that respects human agency while acknowledging biological influence. Some critics worry about sensationalism surrounding the discovery, cautioning against reducing historical complexity to genetic determinants. Others question whether this focus distracts from remembering the victims of Hitler's regime and the broader socio-political context of his rise. The conversation around these findings reflects ongoing tensions between science, history, and public perception. Nevertheless, many agree that this research enriches historical inquiry by opening new avenues to explore the interplay of biology and behavior. It encourages interdisciplinary dialogue, combining genetics, psychology, and history to build a more complete picture. This integration can refine our understanding of both individuals and the forces shaping history. The scientific community also notes that discoveries like this set precedents for how we study infamous figures in the future, blending cutting-edge technology with archival research. It paves the way for more nuanced biographical portraits influenced by genetics and environment alike. Yet, this approach requires humility and acknowledgement of its limits. At the same time, historians remind us that DNA cannot provide moral judgments or replace critical analysis of decisions, ideologies, and societal factors. The findings should be a tool, not a verdict, ensuring that history remains a human story, shaped by many dimensions beyond genes. This evolving conversation continues to shape how we reflect on historical legacies, the roots of behavior, and the responsibilities of interpreting science within cultural memory. Genetics adds a new layer, but never tells the whole story. In this context, the public reception of such research becomes as significant as the findings themselves. Media narratives often simplify nuanced scholarship, and scholars worry that subtle conclusions may be flattened into provocative headlines. This risk reinforces the need for historians and scientists to actively participate in public discourse, clarifying what genetic evidence can and cannot say. Thoughtful communication is not an accessory to research, but an ethical obligation that shapes collective understanding. The debate also revives older questions about nature and nurture, reminding audiences that these forces are inseparable rather than competing explanations. Genetics may illuminate vulnerabilities or tendencies, but historical circumstances, personal ambition, social structures, and ideology ultimately channel those traits into action. Recognizing this interplay guards against both biological reductionism and historical amnesia. Furthermore, the discussion has prompted renewed reflection on how societies memorialize perpetrators versus victims. Scholars stress that any attention given to the biology of infamous individuals must be carefully contextualized so it does not eclipse remembrance, accountability, or moral clarity. The science should serve understanding, not fascination. Ultimately, this episode illustrates how modern tools can reopen settled histories without rewriting their ethical foundations. DNA analysis, when integrated responsibly, can deepen inquiry rather than distort it. By maintaining critical distance and interdisciplinary rigor, researchers ensure that scientific insight enhances historical wisdom instead of overshadowing it. With these reactions framing the impact of genetic revelations, it is vital to consider broader reflections on how such scientific insights reshape our understanding of history itself. Broader reflections on genetics and history. The unraveling of Adolf Hitler's DNA offers a striking example of how genetic science can reshape our understanding of historical figures. It pushes us to reconsider what defines a person: biology, environment, or the complex blend of both. In Hitler's case, genetics adds a new dimension, revealing vulnerabilities and traits previously hidden behind myths and propaganda. This challenges the simple caricatures we often rely on when imagining the past. Modern genetics allows historians and scientists to dig beneath the surface of documents and eyewitness accounts. It opens a dialogue between the literal code within our cells and the narratives passed down through generations. This intersection enriches history and invites a more layered interpretation of motives and behaviors, especially for figures as consequential as Hitler. At the same time, the case serves as a warning against genetic determinism, the idea that DNA alone dictates fate. While the discovery of a rare disorder provides insight into Hitler's physiology and possibly some psychological traits, it does not excuse or fully explain his choices and actions. Morality, ideology, and personal accountability belong to a realm beyond biology. This balance between understanding biology and preserving human responsibility is crucial. It reminds us that while genetics can influence tendencies, it does not eliminate free will or ethical judgment. Recognizing this complexity helps prevent oversimplified narratives and encourages deeper inquiry into how history unfolds. The mixture of genetic evidence also forces historians to take a fresh look at their source evaluation. It not only comes along with a scientific instrument, but also one that must go hand in hand with the conventional historical methods. This interdisciplinary approach opens up new avenues for the past to be lived and its impacts to be reconstructed. In addition to this, the revelation raises larger questions about society in terms of identity and stigma. Hitler's disorder was genetic, and it reflected upon the society, which probably affected his life and identity, the same way that culture and biology get intertwined in the making of people today. The comprehension of such overlaps strengthens empathy without losing the essential critical evaluation. If we take Hitler's case as an example, We can see how genetics might change the course of studies of other historical characters, revealing, humanizing, or complicating their stories. The promise brings to life not only richer history books and documentaries, but also ethical dilemmas around the areas of privacy and interpretation that need to be approached with care. In the end, the learning points are not only about the past, but also about the present and future regarding human nature perception. They signal the fine line we tread between our genetic predispositions and the forces that shape our behaviors, aspirations, and beliefs. The combination of science and history now discloses a narrative that is much more complex than what was thought before. While we process these findings, we will not forget that history is not a dead thing, nor is it immutable. The past is always getting new technological lights, and the approach to it is always seeking new horizons of humility, curiosity, and openness to changing our viewpoint according to newly uncovered evidence. The analysis of Adolf Hitler's DNA has unveiled truths that challenge myths and deepen our grasp of history's darkest chapters. By blending genetics with history, we gain a nuanced picture that balances biology with human choice. If you found this exploration eye-opening, please like and subscribe for more compelling journeys into the past and present.